have to abide by those new rules as part of our Make Work Pay legislation.
That central tension, though, you've...
Ricky Gervais shattered the delicate image of Starmer's charm during his intense interview, where he not only mocked the British Prime Minister, but also thoroughly dismantled him.
Have to abide by those new rules as part of our Make Work Pay legislation.
That central tension, though, you've, in the last week, you're holding this event today, you're very pleased with the people in the room, there's a lot of money in the room. Last week, you announced new workers' rights legislation. There is a tension here. And
Ricky, who has never understood the concept of restraint, launched a furious assault on Starmer, laying bare his lies for the entire nation to see. How do you feel about such a devastating blow? But Ricky didn't stop with Starmer. He relentlessly criticized the entire team of government officials who had barely settled into their comfortable seats before they began to shamelessly indulge in luxury at the expense of ordinary taxpayers. Gervais's critique was so powerful that their high-profile efforts crumbled like a house of cards.
Legislation that we published last week to make work pay was all about. But the people I blame are the previous government who allowed those loopholes to exist. We're closing those, and every company investing in Britain, creating jobs in Britain.
Are you curious about the frustration and outright rage brewing among the British? And the answer is quite evident. The situation has rapidly worsened since Starmer took office and began aggressively imprisoning individuals, as seen in the case of Tommy Robinson. He truly went after Robinson, and anyone with even a basic understanding of the situation can see the potential repercussions. People feel their rights and freedoms are being violated, and this sense of injustice fuels anger that cannot be overlooked. Consider this: arresting a man with devoted supporters is hardly a move that will soothe tensions. Instead, it only intensifies the situation, especially as more individuals rally around Robinson. Starmer's crackdown is not just making headlines, it is sparking real unrest and riots across the country. People perceive that they are being oppressed, which only heightens their anger and resolve to resist.
The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. The only way to stop this is with a Labour government.
If you once felt a sense of safety in your homes and on the streets, Starmer has already begun to undermine that precious feeling of security. Does he truly not understand the potential consequences of his actions? It's simply astonishing. This is not at all the approach we anticipated in this discussion. We all hoped for something better, protection and support. But instead, we are confronted with a threat to our peace of mind.
But you see, this is part of the problem of what I mean by him sort of running rings around the system, because when you say he was arrested under terror charges, I mean, he's clearly not a terrorist, is he?
Certainly not. I mean, certainly from the information that's been provided, he has clearly obviously spoken out about matters that he believes in. Not everybody necessarily agrees with him. There is this argument with regards to freedom of speech, right. And that is something that obviously...
While people continue to debate the justification of imprisoning individuals without hesitation, Starmer's situation is becoming increasingly dire. Let's be honest, this is far from the only promise he has broken since taking office, right? He approached us with a broad smile and bold commitments to alleviate our burdens and tackle the crisis surrounding electricity costs. And what do we see now? We find ourselves trapped in a situation where financial pressure is only mounting, bills are soaring, taxes are rising, and there's no sign of the promised relief. As if that weren't enough, Starmer has only worsened the plight of ordinary Britons, leaving them in even greater distress.
More than 1,000 prisoners have been released earlier today as part of a government scheme to ease overcrowding in jails. Offenders sentenced to more than 5 years will be released on licence after spending 40% of their time behind bars. The government has said the hope is to do better at rehabilitating offenders and expand forms of punishment outside of jail.
Someone has entirely lost sight of their true purpose and altered their words, seemingly without any effort to conceal it. It's astonishing. How can one so easily betray their beliefs and not feel a hint of shame?
Perhaps the most ludicrous part of the Prime Minister's speech on Monday was when he said he won't accept the idea that any of the problems people are facing are caused by the 14 years of Conservative government. He won't say how many prisoners they've released early. He won't say if they're burglars, abusers or stalkers. He won't say where they are or what support their victims are getting. Yet he thinks he has the right to tell people they can't blame his government for any of it. Doesn't he think that rather than confiscating lanyards like some jumped-up milk monitor, he should stop issuing get-out-of-jail cards free to prisoners considered a risk to children?
Starmer appears to be facing an incredibly tough battle against these objections. The majority of people are against him, but it's particularly painful for Labour to receive criticism from Gervais, who is effectively undermining his own objectives. How can anyone argue with that?
People simply do not understand. I do not understand how our new Labour government can cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners and leave the super-rich untouched. This is not what people voted for.
It wasn't merely a decision. It was a clear declaration of his true priorities. Frankly, it's not surprising that people have significant doubts about his sanity. How can anyone remain composed when such choices are made?
Yesterday we witnessed some extraordinary celebratory scenes outside Britain's prisons where in some cases serious career criminals were released. And this to make way for, yes, rioters, but equally those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. Does the Prime Minister understand? There is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system.
I'm angry to be put in a position of having to release people who should be in prison because the last government broke the prison system.
It appears that Starmer deliberately aims to provoke anger even among the most patient individuals with his utterly outrageous decisions. One such decision is to cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners who are already facing tough circumstances. Meanwhile, he remains unfazed as if nothing is amiss. It's truly shocking.
In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again.
One might assume that the economic crisis has compelled the government to strip pensioners of their livelihoods. However, the reality is strikingly different. While the less fortunate struggle to make ends meet amid rising taxes, the already wealthy continue to receive substantial salary increases without hesitation. Strikes in the National Health Service cost taxpayers an astonishing £1.7 billion last year, underscoring how absurd and ridiculous these employee complaints about the so-called financial crisis truly are. Ricky Gervais, known for his candor, didn't hold back in labeling Starmer's approach as an outright mockery. His blunt remarks have placed Starmer in a highly uncomfortable position at Downing Street. People are starting to recognize the grim reality behind his decisions, realizing that the Labour government is relentlessly feeding them lies. It's time for everyone to question this entire absurd situation. What are your thoughts on this video? Share your opinions in the comments. See,